difícil. Fuerte el aplauso.
Lo siento, pero no hablo español, so I switch over to English. However, if you have questions or if I'm saying something that maybe you need a translator, I asked Luisa to help me. So welcome, and thank you so much, Reset, for having me, and thank you, Juarez, for inviting me as well. It's such an honor to be here. I was so excited this morning at the hotel room when we were eating our breakfast buffet. I was telling everybody, Mexico's got the best food in the world. Look at these chilaquiles, the best. So anyway, thank you. So before I start talking about blockchain, because blockchain can mean so many different things depending upon who you talk to, I'm curious to learn about this room. How many of you have ever heard of blockchain, I guess, before today? Can you please raise your hand? Oh, 2 people, okay. How many of you want to have your own business and be an entrepreneur? Okay. How many of you want to invest in cryptocurrencies and buy Bitcoin? How many of you just, or whatever, blockchain, you just kind of want to know what it is? Okay. So I'm assuming, in that case, so I'm going to try to explain in 20 minutes what took me probably 3 months to understand. So please realize that when you leave today, chances are, unless you're much smarter than I am, you may not understand blockchain 100%, but you'll have a little bit of an understanding of what blockchain can do. So blockchain is a technology that will revolutionize the way we transact and do business around the world. It's kind of like saying, going back in the 1990s and telling people there's this thing called the internet, and it's going to change the way we connect with all of our brothers and sisters and the way we do business around the world. Most people don't really understand, well, what was the internet? And so that's where we are with blockchain. We have this opportunity to say, wow, the internet changed the world and this new technology is going to change the world again. So how do we get involved? I'll talk a little bit about that. But what I'm mostly excited about with blockchain is blockchain helps reduce barriers for people all around the world. And this is important to me because I grew up with a lot of barriers. I was born in Los Angeles. How many of you have been to Los Angeles? Okay. It is probably the most diverse city, I would say, in the world. People from all different backgrounds. And when I was a teenager, we moved to a tiny town of maybe 600 people in northern Utah. The town was so small, we had one stop sign. That was it. And so, being a young girl, it was very challenging to have opportunities. Also, in my community, girls were told, you don't need an education. So, it was very difficult. And when I went to apply for colleges, I didn't have, our family is extremely, extremely poor. Sometimes I didn't know if we'd have anything to eat for dinner. Or if we did have something to eat, my parents would say, okay, Heidi, you have to go out and kill the chicken, and we'd eat the chicken for dinner that night. So what this meant was, when it was time to apply for colleges, I didn't have the money to apply for college application fees. So I faced a lot of barriers, being a girl, being multiracial, in the community I lived in, and being very poor. And so I have a very special place in my heart for technologies that help reduce barriers, and blockchain is one of them. So fast forward, I actually did get a scholarship and I traveled all around the world. And it was awesome meeting people, but what I realized is that so many people around the world, they also have barriers, just like I did. Barriers, some of them don't have an opportunity to go to school. Some of them can't open up a simple financial service like a bank account. Many did not have their labor practices protected. And some people didn't even have an opportunity to vote. And so all of that stayed with me. Fast forward, I ended up getting an amazing job for a company called AIG. You're probably all too young, but 10 years ago, AIG, there was this thing called the Great Recession. I'm sure you're probably aware of it. And what happened was there are a lot of these companies that were too centralized with power. They had too much power, they were very greedy, and they didn't share the data between these institutions. So a lot of companies didn't know what they were selling to other companies. And I worked for AIG. The United States had to bail out actually the banks were going out of business, and the United States said, well, too bad, until AIG said, we're gonna go out of business. And that's when the United States said, we need to save you. And the reason being, if AIG went out of business, the world would have gone into a major, major depression. Not even a recession, but a depression. And that's when I realized, wow, how scary is it that some of these companies have this much power that they can change the lives of the rest of the world. And I bring this up to you because I'm going to talk about how blockchain is almost a social movement, realizing we want to decentralize power and spread it around so that no single institution can put us in danger like that again. So anyway, I mentioned all of this. I decided I wanted to do something where I helped get rid of the middlemen. I wanted to get rid of the banks because they caused so much problem. And I started a startup to get rid of the middlemen, to get rid of the banks. And I came across, before that, I had no technology experience. I wasn't even on Facebook. And I found this technology, blockchain, last year in January, and I started reading and I realized, oh my goodness, this technology is all about getting rid of the banks. It's all about sharing for all of us in this economy. And so when I went to go hire developers and speak to investors in Los Angeles, in Southern California, where I live, I couldn't find anybody. And that's when I went back to UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. That's where I went to school, and I said, why are we not doing anything about this? UCLA, you invented the internet. There's actually a room there at UCLA where they show the first transmissions that were sent on the internet. So this is the second internet. Why are we not doing more? And that's when I founded the Los Angeles Blockchain Lab. So we are a partnership of UCLA, USC, Caltech, UCI, City of Los Angeles, Panasonic, Lamborghini, JPL NASA, a whole bunch of companies focused on blockchain and how do we create jobs and how do we create a sustainable blockchain ecosystem. Fast forward, I get a phone call from Richard Branson. Do you guys know who Richard Branson is? No. He's Virgin, have you heard of Virgin? Virgin Records, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Airlines. He's basically a billionaire. And he said, Heidi, I want you to come to my island. He owns an island. I want you to come to my island. We're going to pay for everything. And we want you to talk about blockchain. I was like, are you serious? I'm new to this technology, whatever. So I fly on this plane. I didn't even know where Necker Island was, but it's in the Virgin Islands. And when I was there, we stayed at his house in Necker Island, and only 40 people were invited, and there were 5 billionaires, 2 prime ministers, an astronaut, and me. And I kept thinking to myself, how did I get here from small Hiram, Utah, to Richard Branson's island? And since then, I've had an opportunity through blockchain to travel all around the world to speak about the technology. I just came back from the United Nations General Assembly. So I mention all of this not because I'm special, but because these are some of the opportunities that we have for everybody. And the other thing is blockchain is not a localized technology. Blockchain is global. We like to say we're building blockchain bridges, and we actually need, this should not come out of Silicon Valley or Beijing, China, or this should be a global, we need everybody to participate, because what we found is we believe in this new economy, and for that to work, we need all types of people. So I'm very excited here to talk to you about blockchain. So that is my story, and that's why I am here. So how many of you have heard of Bitcoin? Okay, a few more people. I'm going to talk just a little bit about Bitcoin because I want to make sure you understand there's a difference between Bitcoin and blockchain. So when I started the blockchain lab, nobody knew what blockchain was, or maybe a couple people knew what Bitcoin was. But by the end of last year, everybody had pretty much heard what Bitcoin was. It took the founders of Facebook, Google, Amazon, average of 14 years to 24 years to become billionaires. In blockchain, by the end of last year, some entrepreneurs became a billionaire in less than a year. There was one that became a billionaire in less than 6 months, and another one who became a billionaire in less than a month. That's how fast this industry was moving. And then startups, traditionally startups go to get venture capital money to launch their company. In the blockchain, and I actually have my own startup too, and we're trying to raise $2 million, which is a lot of money. But in the blockchain space, startups were raising $100 million, $200 million, $500 million, $4 billion, sometimes within 24 hours. And they didn't even have a product. That's how big and how fast this space is moving. But by the end of 2017 and the first of this year, a lot of people lost their money too. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of scams. The price of the cryptocurrency went up and then down. And then also places where people stored their money got hacked. So we saw this up and this drive down. I bring all of this to you because I think actually what's more exciting than cryptocurrency is the technology. We see that the technology is going to grow significantly in the next 10 years, where it will actually be a part of all of our lives. So I want to make very clear there are 4 different parts of this technology. Okay, cryptocurrency, that is what you hear, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ether. Cryptocurrency is basically just another type of money that you use it's a digital type of money. And someday, a lot of people in this space hope that it will either be just as used as traditional money, or some even hope that it replaces traditional money. In some countries like Japan, they've actually accepted it as official legal tender. Then there's this thing called the initial coin offerings, ICOs. ICOs are those startups that I mentioned that have been raising crazy amounts of money. And I won't get into the details. I could talk for hours on that as well. But basically, if right now the United States has deemed that the ICOs, there's a lot of questions about regulation around ICOs, so that's changing. But when you hear in the news Bitcoin and cryptocurrency market, we're pretty much talking about these things, cryptocurrencies and initial coin offerings. Today, I'm going to talk about blockchain. Blockchain is the technology that makes that all of the cryptocurrencies and the ICOs and the startups are based upon. So is that clear? Okay. All right, so just a quick history lesson. You guys remember I worked for AIG and there was this great recession, and we realized as a country, and I'm sure as the rest of the world, there are these centralized institutions that control, they have too much power. And what happens when they fail? Well, they put all of us at risk. Bitcoin was the original blockchain technology, and blockchain helps reduce the need for these big centralized institutions. And I'm sorry, you guys, I'm going to get a little technical here, but please bear with me. So what it does is it reduces this need for the middleman, like a bank or any large institution, and it decentralizes their power, and it makes all of their transactions transparent. Okay, you're probably like, what is she talking about? But let me get to that. So first of all, let's talk about why do we need a middleman? Okay, in the online world that we live in, we're all living in this digital world now more and more, right? If I were, you guys don't know me, if I were to somehow email you $1 or peso or whatever, and I don't use a bank. I don't use Venmo, PayPal, Transwestern Union, nothing. How would you, and you're on the other end, and maybe you're selling me something, how would you know my dollar is really $1 and that I didn't make it up? You can't. There's no way of knowing. And that's why what happened was there are these middlemen that come in, there are banks that say, oh yes, Heidi is who she says she is. She really does have $1. We're going to make sure that dollar gets transferred to you, and so on. And so something like Amazon, think about Amazon. Amazon's probably one of the perfect examples is, I get online, I've got my profile, I shop, oh, I got this clothing or whatever, I like this product. and I let the vendor know, I want to buy your product. Well, Amazon then makes sure, okay, Heidi is really Heidi. She's not pretending to be something else. She really does have this money. The money was transferred to the vendor. The vendor received the money. The product was, I don't know, a pair of jeans. It cost $80. It was shipped on this day, and it was delivered on this day. And they keep a recording of all of those transactions. And that we need Amazon, we need these middlemen to make sure our transactions are trusted. But, and how they do that is they validate, again, I am who I say I am. The problem is, now there are all of these middlemen, layers and layers and layers of middlemen, each of them recording, Heidi's Heidi, she's $1, here's the vendor. And what happens is, they're all adding layers of cost and time, and then these ledgers, they don't talk to each other, so it's confusion. So if you think about the Amazon transaction, there's me, there's my bank, there's my credit card processing company, there's the vendor's bank, Amazon, they're all layers of middlemen. So, and not only that, but the information that Amazon or any middleman has, the data that they keep on us, which is our own data, it's actually not safe. So a lot of these companies can be hacked, they can make mistakes, they can lose your data, they can even sell your data and make money off of your data. So enter blockchain. Okay, this is gonna get a little technical, but what blockchain does is it takes that centralized middleman concept and flips it upside down. And instead of Amazon or one company managing this ledger, the ledger is copied and shared amongst hundreds of thousands of computer processing units around the world. We call these computer processing units miners. And each of the miners now have a copy of that ledger. And so basically, and they're now responsible for validating all of those transactions. So I'm going to take you really quickly through the original blockchain protocol, which is Bitcoin, just so you can see how it works from a technological perspective, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the use cases. Okay, so what happens is Heidi wants to buy that product off of Amazon, okay? So that is now made. Heidi wants to buy this transaction for $1. This transaction then, instead of Amazon saying, okay, Heidi's doing hundreds of thousands of miners around the world, they see, oh, Heidi wants to do this. So, and they each have a copy of that ledger. Heidi had $5 in her account, and today she's doing this. Then what happens is, in order for them to validate that transaction, I'm who I say I am, they compete to solve a mathematical problem. And whoever wins first is awarded some Bitcoin. But before they're awarded the Bitcoin, all of the other miners in the group have to double check that person's math and say, okay, yes, the math was done correctly, and they have to approve, at least the majority of them have to approve that it was done correctly. Then that winner, or the miner, takes my transaction, it's an approved transaction, and it combines it with a lot of other approved transactions and puts it into a block of prior approved transactions. This block is then attached or chained to another block of prior transactions, and then every single miner, all of their information is updated, all of their ledgers are updated, and the miner, that one winning miner, receives Bitcoin. And after about 3 to 4 of these blocks, it's pretty impossible, I shouldn't say it's impossible, but it's pretty difficult to go back and change the data. And then the transaction is complete. So I know that's a lot to absorb, but that's kind of a quick and dirty snapshot of how it works. So what does this mean? Well, what this means is now we don't have to have middlemen to make sure to trust our transactions. Now, we can trust code, computer code, instead of having to have a middleman, like a bank, like Amazon, like Facebook. And we're seeing a lot, and we anticipate that the World Economic Forum predicted that by 2027, 10% of the global GDP will be built on a blockchain. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the use cases, all right? So what does this mean? Because the need for middlemen is reduced, so are their fees. And it becomes more cost effective or less costly to transact digitally. So today there are 2 billion people around the world that are unbanked or underbanked. They don't have a bank account. Like I mentioned, when I traveled around the world, I saw all of these people who didn't have a bank account. Because banks said, we don't want to take your $10, it's not worth it for us. But what we're seeing now is people are able to store money and transfer money. So if you've ever transferred, I tried to transfer some money to through my company the other day, and I wanted to transfer $100 from one bank account to another. And they were going to charge me $35 to transfer $100, which is crazy. In blockchain can reduce this amount to pennies because we're getting rid of all of those middlemen. So now for the first time we see these 2 billion people who don't have bank accounts able to digitally store and transfer money. The other thing is because blockchain records on a ledger a product from its beginning, from its raw materials to when we put it on a shelf, that's the supply chain of a product, we can better guarantee or better trust our products and services. So when I buy honey, it says 100% honey, and maybe it's organic and fair trade certified. But really, how do I know that it's organic? You really don't. And you have to trust those middlemen. But with blockchain will actually help us from the very beginning better understand the products and services we use. So, for example, those diamond engagement rings, now we can track and make sure that no, it wasn't a blood diamond. Or when we eat chocolate, I don't know if it's the same here in Mexico, but when we eat chocolate in the US, we want to be very aware that no children were used in making that chocolate. Or when we send money to a refugee to help that refugee, in the world today, 1/3 of all money and food that's sent to refugees is lost or stolen. With blockchain, we can help make sure that it actually gets there. So some of the exciting things that I'm seeing. So I work with JPL, NASA, and JPL is the part of NASA that they actually build the robotics and the missiles. And it was very intimidating when the CEO called me and said, we want you to talk about blockchain to our engineers. I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Because it's very, very scary. But what I found out that JPL is interested in blockchain because what happens when they send a rocket up in space? And all of the parts that they're purchasing from around the world, they're called smart parts. So there's the Internet of Things. It's connected to, you can, from afar, from a remote place, control those parts. Well, what happens 5 years, so these missiles go up and they're in the space for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. What happens if somebody who manufactured some part decides that they want to attack the world? And they hit a button and that missile comes back down to wherever and is now used as a weapon. So we're looking at blockchain. How can blockchain help prevent that? I'm working with the city of Los Angeles on our smart city initiatives. And one of the things we're looking at is someday, very soon, your refrigerator, when you drink your last gallon of milk and you put your empty milk jug or wherever, you close your refrigerator door, your refrigerator will tell your car to go to the store to pick up a gallon of milk, and we'll go back to the car and back to your home. And how do you protect your car from driving off, or how do you make sure that those commands are actually engaged? Well, blockchain can help do that. Some other things are, I love this one. What happens today in pharmaceuticals, large pharmaceutical companies will go around the world to find a special plant that can some of the substance from that plant can help cure some horrible disease, or maybe it's used for cosmetic reasons. But traditionally what happens is these pharmaceutical companies would go to a village, maybe in the Amazon, and find this special plant, take that plant, go back usually to the US, and extract the liquids from that plant or the chemical compounds, and then make this drug, and then sell the drugs for hundreds of millions of dollars. But the people who lived in that village, they never get a penny from that plant. Blockchain can start to track that, how much of that plant was used in that chemical compound, and when they sell those drugs, that money then can go back to the village. I'll just give you two more examples really quickly. Another is, do any of you guys watch American football? Okay, so if you were given an opportunity to vote on some of the play calls, like throw the ball or pass the ball, and you found, and somebody said, yeah, you can help vote every play call. You get 3 choices and you can vote. Well, you can imagine how angry a fan would be if they thought they voted and they found out that their vote wasn't counted. They would go insane. I mean, I know in Los Angeles, we like to burn cars and throw things off the cliff. So you can imagine how angry a fan would be. Well, I'm seeing some startups using blockchain with a football team that they purchased in Salt Lake City, Utah, that says, okay, fans, you can vote, and we guarantee your vote's going to be accounted for because we're using blockchain. And one last, and I have my own company, Proof of Art, where we're very excited about, right now we all use Facebook and different social media, right? And when you get on, basically you're swarmed with advertisements. Well, with blockchain, and you don't get it, you don't have a choice, you're just given advertisements. Well, with blockchain, you're given advertisements, and every time your eye looks at something, you spend a little bit of time, of your time, and you don't get compensated. With blockchain, we're tracking ways of making sure for every micro amount of time you look at advertisement, you get paid, or you get to decide if you see this advertisement, or you get to decide if that company gets your personal data. And if you decide that, you might even get paid. And then the last thing, and we could talk about hundreds and hundreds of use cases, but the last thing that I also hold dearest to my heart, when I was at Richard Branson's summit, my roommate, she was from Afghanistan. She had to flee Afghanistan. The Taliban wanted to kill her because she was teaching science to young women. And she teaches science to young women and she helps get them jobs. Oh, my time's up? Sorry. Really quickly, I said to her, well, why are you here? And she said she pays her young women in Bitcoin because her family, the woman's father, brothers, cannot steal the money from them. And this is for an opportunity for women in a country like Afghanistan to save money and actually become somewhat independent. So last but not least, I do want to finish with, I highly, highly encourage all of you, there are many, many issues that we face in blockchain right now, but probably the biggest issue is that we don't have enough people who understand it, we don't have enough business people, we don't have enough coders, we don't have enough accountants or attorneys, and we don't have enough diversity. Right now, unfortunately, most people who are in blockchain are your typical Silicon Valley guy. And we want to make sure in this new economy that we're diversified and we include all of our brothers and sisters from around the world. So I highly suggest, please look into blockchain. I'm happy to talk with you afterwards about how you can get your career into blockchain, but this is the future. And I'm very excited because it helps reduce barriers and it does build blockchain bridges. Thank you so much.
Vamos a empezar con la sección de preguntas y respuestas.